Hello, everyone. My name is Magali COLIMON-CHRISTOPHER, and today Conch Shell Productions Artist Collective has a wonderful member sharing wonderful experiences working in the writer's room, Cris Eli Blak. Welcome, Cris. Welcome. And he's going to be sharing wonderful perspectives with us all. And our goal is to share it with you because at Conch Shell Productions, our vision is to inspire Caribbean and Caribbean diaspora writers to own their voice. And how else do you own your voice if not by learning from peers?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me to lead this conversation. I mean, this basically rooted, one, I'm in the Conch Shell community. I was a member of the collective last year. And, I'm a playwright, but through a very strange set of circumstances that I'll kind of track and go over in this conversation. I ended up in Los Angeles writing for a TV show, and this somehow becoming my life for at least the foreseeable future. And I've seen a lot of I've had a lot of people ask me about that pipeline, that playwright to TV staff writer or TV writer or even TV producer pipeline. And I've also seen that I don't come to the meetings, but I still stalk the email threads. So I've also seen it kind of as a topic of conversation that's come up within the group. So, I mean, basically, if there's any questions directly about it that come up, I want to carve out most of the time for that and most of the time to make it a true conversation. The only thing I'll kind of share is how I got to this point, because I think that my that my journey is a really stern example of there not being a right path. Because I feel like a lot of people tell you, you got to do it like this. You got to get the agent, and then the agent sends off to the person, and that person gives it to somebody else, or you have to go to the mail room and do all this stuff. But mine isn't like that. And I think kind of tracks with my entire life, which has kind of been an unorthodox path into doing what I'm doing. I feel like in a lot of these spaces, you encounter people who have been doing theater since they were 5. You always meet the person who was like, "Oh, I was in Annie when I was 6, and my mom was the costume designer, and my dad held the camcorder and filmed the performance." And from the moment I sang Hard Knock Life, I was in love with this thing. That wasn't me. I wasn't that kid. I didn't get into theater until I was basically a senior in high school. And that was more on the acting, poetry front. I didn't write a play until 2019, when I was 20 years old. And I didn't study it in school. I've never taken a class for playwriting or anything like that. It was just something that I decided to do one day, fell in love with doing, didn't stop doing, and I strangely lucked out due to the pandemic, which sounds really bad because over 1 million people died, but I'm like, it was great for me. And what happened is that because we were all locked up, a lot of the walls that exist in theater in terms of how to get your work seen no longer existed. And I'm sure maybe you all see this in writing and submitting stuff now that the pandemic is over. Is that you have to, it's a lot of things about you have to live in this state, or you have to live in this city, or you have to be, you have to fly yourself out to see the performance, or you have to be, it is so many stipulations that come up. But 2020, 2021, when I really started committing myself to writing plays, none of those existed because we were all just at home. We were all just on Zoom calls. And so it was a lot easier to get access to theaters and to that community. And I kind of saw my kind of great fortune in that and said, well, I'm just going to, because I didn't have anything. I didn't have the connections. I didn't have an agent. I didn't know anyone in the industry or in the business. I was a kid. I grew up in Houston, Texas. Single mom, not a lot of money. That whole story. I went to the same college that Petron went to. I got my undergrad where he got his graduate at UCM, Southern Mississippi. and go Golden Eagles. And so I was so far out of the scene. And again, I didn't study theater there. I didn't know any of the theater kids there. So it wasn't anything I had any connection to. So what I decided to do was I'm going to write as much as I can during this time, and I'm going to just bother people. I'm just going to email people. I'm just going to email whoever I can get their email address. I'm going to send my shows to any company, any place I can send them to, whether they fit in or not to those people or to those companies. I am at one point someone posted a list of every Black-owned theater in the United States. I said, I'm at home. I'm locked up. We're all locked up. No one wants to go outside. I'm going to email every single one of these theaters. It was literally just this thing that just kind of sparked in me of this is a moment that, fortunately isn't going to happen again, or hopefully isn't going to happen again in our lifetime. And it's a very negative moment, but let me try to find the positive in it and let me try to benefit off of us all being locked up. And so I was doing Zoom productions like crazy. I was, having shows in, London, but it was on Zoom and people were just at home in their flats recording it, but it looked decent on a resume. And so by the time I was doing, submitting to competitions and getting my name out in that way. So by the time we kind of got out of the pandemic and started doing things in person, I kind of knew what I was doing. In 2019, 2020, when I got started, like all of us, the first things I wrote were just shit. Like it was just bad stuff. It just wasn't good. But by the time we got out of it, I had just practiced, so much and I practiced so much that I got an okay at it. And I gotten so much rejection up to that point that I wasn't fazed by it. So once I started going into these physical spaces, I was able to move a little more confidently and not be afraid of being told no, because I'd emailed enough people and not heard back, or emailed enough people or sent shows off or applied to enough things and gotten a no, to where that didn't bother me. I always tell people I was rejected enough in middle school. Like getting an email from a company being like, we're not interested in your show isn't a big deal to me. And so I just kept on that path of doing playwriting and trying to grow in that and get as many residencies and fellowships and have productions of my shows and have readings and workshops of my shows as often as possible, and have, again, because I didn't know anyone in the industry, have such an output that it's impossible to ignore. And such an output to where once I got into a room with those connections, I could show my resume and say, my resume is better than that kid out of Yale that you think is such hot shit. And I got a public library education on this. And so, I just kind of went down that path. And then what happened was, I think this is also a lesson in never letting your ego get ahead of you and never thinking you're too good for anything, because an opportunity came up. I don't know if you're on the rapper Joey Badass, but Joey Badass created a mentorship program as a mentorship program for men of color. Now, I very well could have let my ego lead me and say, I don't need mentorship. I don't need to learn. I don't need to grow. I've done my hours. I've been writing for 3 years at this point. I've had productions of my shows. I've won awards. Like, why do I need to be mentored? But at the time, it was also a time where life had humbled me. And I was kind of in this very difficult position, just personally, financially, to where I had moved to a different city. I was just chasing things that weren't mine, and life has a way of showing you where you're not supposed to be a lot of the time. And I was just in hell, and I didn't know what to do. And I went back to that kind of 20-year-old mindset of I'm just gonna throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. So I applied to this mentorship program. And the way it worked is you applied, you chose a mentor that you wanted to mentor you, and then it was up to them to make a selection based on whoever applied. So, I mean, in this mentorship, like I said, Joey Badass founded it. Swizz Beatz is a mentor, Denzel Curry, Corday, a bunch of like NBA players. But my basketball dreams died in high school, so I wasn't going to choose any of them.
Who did you choose?
Huh?
We want to know, who did you choose?
I chose was the only person who was like a writer. And there were no theater people. There was only this TV guy named Sasha Penn. And so I said, well, I guess I'll just go with him. He's the only one close to me. So I applied, I left it alone. And then maybe 2 months later, 3 months later, I got an email saying that Sasha had chosen me as his mentee. And the only thing that meant was that once a month for a year, we would get on a Zoom call. I would ask him questions and he would give me answers, not too dissimilar from what is happening right now. And that'd be it. It wasn't any money involved. It was just an opportunity to talk to someone with a lot more money than you once a month. And so but I was happy with it. I was like, you know what? This is still a notch on my belt. It might not be the biggest thing, but what I'm going to gain from it, wisdom wise and knowledge wise from this professional, is going to make up for that. And then what happened is, Sasha is like a very, like, I mean, the guy's working like 8 shows at once right now. So he's very like, I don't have time. Like, I got on the Zoom the first time in January of this year, and he was like, listen, I don't really want to just sit on a Zoom and answer your questions unless that's what you want to do. But I want you to tell me what you want out of this. If you want a job out of this, tell me you want a job out of this. And that's what we'll work towards. Give me a goal that we can shoot towards. And so I was like, I'd like a job. A job sounds nice. And he was like, all right, so the goal then is by the end of the year again, this was this January. He said, by the end of the year, let the goal be to have you in LA working on a TV show. I was like, fine, that sounds good to me. So that was in January. The second Zoom meeting we had, at the end of that one, he said, send me some stuff that you have. Send me whatever writing you have. Do you have a pilot? And I had one pilot that I had written because I was a playwright. So I had written one pilot. It wasn't my best stuff, but he asked for a pilot. I'm going to send him this one thing that I have. So I sent him that, and I sent him a play. The second time we met, which was in March of this year, he said, I didn't read the play. I didn't read the play, but I read the pilot. And he said it was good. It was good. And he gave me notes. He said, this is how it can be better, because I feel like you're writing TV like a playwright. And that's fine, because the two are very similar. But there are just some things that, your scenes go on the length that a play scene would go. People aren't going to sit and watch, a 20-minute scene on a TV show and just a bunch of very technical things. And he was breaking it down and basically saying, this is good, but maybe not good enough. And I was like, again, that's enough for me. Feed me the knowledge so I can get better. And at the end of that second time of this meeting, we've never met in person. This is the second time we've spoken, period, and the second time being on Zoom. He said, would you be interested in a job on my show? His show is one of the 50 Cent Power shows called Raising Kanan. And he said, would you be interested in writing for the show? I said, yes. Yes, give me a job. We talked about this. And he was like, okay. He was like, no promises, but why don't you send me your resume, a couple more plays since you only have this one pilot, and we'll see what'll happen. And I said, okay, cool. So
What did you send him? What did you send him?
I sent him a play I wrote. He was like, send me what you think are your 2 best plays. Which is like asking a parent, send me your 2 favorite kids. And you have 20 of them, So I sent him a play I wrote called Anonymous Skin, which is about HIV and AIDS in the South. And I sent him a play called, and I sent him, Maglo, this one, I sent him Pitfalls of Exaggerated Swagger, which you all hosted a reading of. And so I sent him those 2. I was just like, we'll see what happens. And I sent him my resume. And he said, next you'll be hearing from like some network people, some like big suit people. Someone from Lionsgate and someone from the Stars Network. And you'll just meet with them and see what happens. And of course, again, I was raised Houston, Texas, single mom, no money, which means I have trust issues. So you tell me, I can get you a job in Hollywood and these rich people are going to be calling you and these network studio people. I'm like, bullshit. Like, you can't. I've heard the stories of like, you're going to be a star and then like I'm on food stamps for the next month. Like, I don't need to hear this. But, again, Sasha being someone who's all about his business was true to his word. And not maybe a week later, I got an email being like, "Hey, I'm so and so's assistant from Lionsgate. We want to set up a meeting with you to talk about you potentially writing on the show." I said, "Okay." So they set up the meeting. About maybe 2 weeks went by, um, and it was like it's like a Teams call or like a Google Meet, and I hop on. It's these two women who are both heads at the studio and network. They each read one of the two plays that I sent. And we just had a conversation, and they were just asking kind of standard job interview questions. They were like, tell us about yourself. What are you interested in doing? And, what characters would you want to be most interested in writing? And, this very standard questions. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm like, hopefully with a job. And I had kind of built like I had told my mom about this interview. Like I had built this up to my core group, my mom, my partner, and all these people being like, this is happening. I don't know if anything's gonna come out of it. Um, but this thing is happening. And if it goes well, our lives are gonna be really good. If it doesn't go well, it felt like being a basketball player and being told you might be drafted into the NBA. No promises though. And so I had this meeting. They asked me these standard questions, and at the end of it, they go, because it's Hollywood and they suck. They go, um, it was really nice meeting you. Hopefully, one day we can work together. Click, and they leave. And I'm in the office that I'm working at the time, and I walk out, and they all know what's happening because I have to leave my duties to go do it. And they're like, "How'd it go? Did you get it?" I'm like, I don't I don't know what just happened. That was a very strange thing that just happened. Like, I think I did well, but they didn't seem that receptive. It was just kind of you know, we now know you, and when the time comes, we'll work together kind of thing. And so I did what I do when things like that happen. I decide I'm gonna go down to the bodega on the corner. I'm gonna buy a whole bunch of junk food. I'm gonna spend the night sad, just eating junk and watching YouTube videos, and I'll be okay in the morning. I'll get over it. So I go and I do that. I have all this junk food, this piled in my hands because I'm just prepared for failure. And I feel my phone vibrating in my pocket. And I take it out, and it's Sasha. And I'm like, he's calling me to tell me that like it's not going to happen, but not, but one day kind of thing. And I pick up, I'm like, hello. And because he's Hollywood and because he's Sasha and this is his personality, he speaks like a character in a movie about Hollywood. I'm like, hello. He goes, Cris Black, are you ready? And I'm like, ready for what? Like you can't, like, you can't. I don't know what you're talking about. He was like, everyone loved they loved you, and we want to do this thing if you want to do this thing. I was like, I'd like to do this thing. And I drop the snacks, literally run back to my office, run up to it, and I'm on the phone. He's telling me all this logistical stuff that I'm not really listening to, and I just kind of he was like telling me how it was gonna work, and I literally tell him like, "This is so nice. I appreciate it so much. I gotta call my mom real quick." And he's like, "Okay." I'm like, "Click," and I call my mom, and I had called her after the meeting, and I was like, "I don't think it went well," and she was like, "No, you got it. You got it. Don't worry about it." And then I got that call, and I call her back, and I'm like, "I got it," and she just screams like she's in a horror movie. And it's like it's just everything. Um, and then I call my partner, who you actually taught, Magley, as an acting student. I don't know if you remember Destiny Tompkins, but
Yes.
yeah.
Oh my God, that's weird. Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she's in the bathroom now. But when I hopped on this, she's like, is that Magley? I was like, yeah. I called her, and she was like, "Can I quit my job now?" I'm like, "Not yet." Um, and it was just a really big moment, and it was really really cool, and all those things. But then once the kind of hype dies down, it's like, oh, now I got to work because now I've gotten this opportunity, and I have to prove that I should have it. Because again, I don't come from these connections. I don't. Just for reference, I walk into the. I'm gonna skip forward a bit. I walk into the writers' room. I'm the youngest. I'm 25 years old. I'm younger than my boss's assistant. Um, Everyone kind of started out doing something else, whether a writer's assistant or someone's personal assistant or a story editor. They started out doing something. I was a playwright, and then one day I was in this room. So there's a lot of pressure when that happens to be like, I didn't just skip the line. I deserve to be here. And it's really stressful, and it caused a lot of stress. Because when you don't have it, all you think about is all the things you can gain. When you get it, you have to think about all the things you can lose. So it's like,
Mm.
I'm in Hollywood now. I'm making more money than I've ever seen in my life. And that's all cute. And that's the American dream and the thing we want. But if I don't show up and if I don't turn in a good draft, this will be my last time in a room like this, or at least it'll be a little bit more of a challenge to get myself in another one.
So let's
Um,
talk about the experience in the room, right? So
yeah,
you're a playwright, day-to-day
right.
life.
I'm a playwright. I'm coming in. I've only written one TV script, and it wasn't the best. And so what they did, because I'm also coming in on season 5 of a show, so everyone on this show has been here since 2019, 2020. They all know each other. They all have a rhythm and a language. I'm coming in. The only language I know is my own. So what they do is they sent me a Dropbox with every single script for the past 4 years, and they're like, this is how we do it. Like, yes, we want you to have your voice in it, but we've developed our voice. We have our style, we have our format, we have the way we do things. So here's every script that's ever been written, not only every episode, but every draft of every script. So here's for 4 years the first, second, third, fourth draft of every single episode. Have fun. And I didn't have to read them, and I didn't read them all. I just watched the show, but I read a lot of them because I was coming from writing plays in Google Docs, not writing TV shows in Final Draft. And so I had to teach myself that and I got a free trial. I still haven't paid for it. But it's, that was the adjustment. And then coming in, being a playwright who's used to sitting in a room with my
Mm.
laptop, writing for myself by myself. I'm now in a room with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 other people. And you're literally mapping out an entire season of TV. No one give a basic idea and a basic outline of how the season's going to go, the main story points, but you don't have the specifics of each episode. So how we start is literally taking a big deck of multicolored index cards and putting them on the wall. And each character is color coded. Episode 1, what does this character do? What does this character do? What does this character do? Episode 2, all through episode 8. And, it was also a lesson in your idea is not going to be the best idea in the room 90% of the time. 90% of the time it's going to be someone else, or you won't say something that you think is a bad idea and someone else says the idea you were thinking about and it is the best idea in the room that day. Or you don't have an idea at all, or you can't think of anything, or you think of something and it doesn't work or it gets shut down. And you just have to be used to that. And I think that's where being a playwright comes in handy, because we're used to being told no. We're used to getting the email being like, thank you for submitting to X festival or X competition. Unfortunately, you didn't make it to the next round of our consideration, but we're used to that shit. And so this imagine.
So is there a level of competition in the room, or is it camaraderie and let's like throw it against the wall and see what sticks?
I can't speak for other rooms. It might be more competitive. I will say this was the best first room to be in because there's no competition. It is at the end of the day, one, at the end of the day, we're all just happy to be here. Two, all of us just want a good show. And we all have to help each other to get that. Because if one of these episodes is bad, then that's a reflection on the staff, not just on the individual writer of that episode. That's all of us. And we all want to come together and get this done and make the best season of TV that we can. And so it's very much, picking each other up and very much bouncing each ideas off of each other and, sending each other drafts of things before we send it off to the showrunner and getting notes from each other and rewriting based on that. So when we did send it to him, it was the best polished version that it can be. So there was no competition at all in that regard because we're all just aiming for, and we all get an episode. Like it's
Right.
not like we're fighting to get our name on it. We all get so we all get our credit, we all get our Writers Guild thing, we all get our check. So what are we competing for? You know, again, I'm sure in other rooms you might go to Grey's Anatomy, they may be squabbing. I don't know. But on our show, it's really all about teamwork and it's all about lifting each other up.
So it
But
sounds like the greatest shift for you as a playwright was working as a team as opposed to a solo exploration. So you become part of like a basketball team as opposed to being a fencer out against the world, right?
exactly, exactly. And sometimes you're on the bench.
Sometimes
Sometimes
you're on
you're on
the
the
bench.
bench. And especially being the newest person on the team. Sometimes you got to sit on the bench, and sometimes you need that because you need to listen. And I think that's the big lesson. Listen. Because you're gonna want to go in the room and you're gonna want to be the smartest guy in there. And you're gonna want to be the one who's like the wonderkin who impresses everyone. And they say, oh, that's why you're in here. That was a great idea. Sometimes you just have to shut up. And that's what I learned. Sometimes you just have to listen to the pros who have been doing this for years and consume what they're doing and say, how can I take this method and work it into my own style? And that's what I had to do and had to really learn how to take some tough notes. There's one writer on the show who obviously I won't name, but he does this thing that's really great for me, which is he reads your drafts on his iPad and he takes a blue pen and he X's out. He's like, this is unnecessary. He would just put big like English teacher X's on your script. You know, when I turned in my first draft of my episode, just to the other writers to get notes, it was like, this is too long. Exit out. We don't need this. Why don't you try to start the scene here? We don't need this scene at all. Why did you make up this new scene? This wasn't in the outline. Exit out. And you get this script back that you're so proud of because this is your baby and you stayed up till 6 a.m. every night for 2 weeks working on it and you get it back and this is a bunch of blue X's. And you have to be able to look at that and say, you know what? They're right. That wasn't necessary. And I am coming at this as what's best for me as a writer and not what's best for the product as a show. But yeah, so this is how I got here and a few lessons I had to learn. I don't want to keep talking. If anyone has questions, I will try to answer it to the best of my ability.
So how did you find your voice in that room? Because it's a collaborative space. It's, a community project. Have you been able to find your voice or are you still in the process?
No, I was able to find or I would say rather I was able to maintain my voice and adjust my voice. Because one thing I kind of learned is that what you don't want to do is come into the room imitating. Because again, you're on a show, season 5 or even season 1, there's already a language to it. The easiest thing to do would be to sit down and say, what does an episode of this show sound like, look like? Let me just copy paste from other episodes so that it's a safe bet that it works out.
Mm.
What I found is that it's much better to come in and say, how do I take the language of this show? How do I keep consistent with the formatting? How do I keep consistent with the storytelling, the page length, the scene length, how the characters talk? And how do I just sprinkle myself into it? And that came from, in my case, literally just saying working with structure of the episode. So, and this isn't a spoiler for my episode, but I kind of landed on, I want the episode to feel like a chess game.
Mm.
No one else would realize watching or reading it, but in the writing of it, because there's this character who enjoys chess, I was like, I'm going to structure it to where it is literally a chess game and pieces are moving in every scene. And pieces are attacking, pieces get knocked out, blase, blase. And it helps that it's a show that's about kind of street life and drug life. So people are getting hit off and moving towards and being pushed back all the time. And so that's how I structured it. I said, this is my chessboard. And I'm thinking in terms of like, who is the pawn in this episode? Who's the rook? Who's the queen? Who's on what side? Who are we sacrificing? Who's the pawn that's being sacrificed? And again, it's not something that's in the writing itself. I'm not putting down on the chessboard, this happens, but it helps me in my head because now I'm leading with my own style that I don't need to tell anybody else. So when I turn it in, it does look like a typical episode of this series. It's formatted and sounds exactly the same as it would either way, but it was done in a way that was accessible to me and didn't feel like I was just trying to get something right. So that's how I kind of found my voice in it. And just like sprinkling in things that were just me. So like I sprinkled in, I'm gonna have this mob boss make a reference to the musical Gypsy. And like I'm gonna have, these characters come from the South like I did and make this joke. And you like and so it's like it's not taken away from anything of the show, but it's something that I can uniquely say that comes from me without jeopardizing anything.
Awesome. So I want to just open the floor for any questions that any members of the Artist Collective would like to ask, because we are a writers collective. And yeah, let's just button it up with your questions. Go for it, everyone.
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah, so Chris, what do you think makes a playwright desirable in that kind of space, or makes someone want to grab a playwright and put them in that space? And you might have said a little bit about this, but what is one thing that you might have had to drop from playwriting and or pick up in TV writing?
Yeah. So what I found a lot is that TV people want playwrights. They want playwrights. They don't want people who are, or it's a balance, but they want playwrights. And it's because a TV show, one, they want the TV show to last and go multiple seasons. And to do that, you gotta have a grasp on character. Have to have a grasp on character and story. And that's all that we do as playwrights is focus on character and story, because that's really all. We don't have the big effects. We don't have the cuts and all the changes of lenses. We don't have that stuff. We don't go on a set. Theater is life happening in front of you. And that's what TV is too. You look at Succession, every episode of Succession is an hour-long play. They talk like they're in a play. They move like they're in a play. They argue like they're in a play. That's just what TV is. It's focusing on the character, and dialogue is really big. Now, I don't know if you're doing Game of Thrones. I don't know what that's like. But that is what makes a playwright desirable, is the ability to really focus on character, dialogue, and story. What I had to kind of sacrifice as a playwright is just, and again, every show is different, but in this show specifically, if you have a scene that's over 2 pages, they're like, this is too long. Because we want in and out, we want to get to the action, we want to keep people engaged. You sit down to watch a play, you know you're just going to be seeing people walking around talking. You can have a 2-hour play that takes place on the same set, that doesn't have any lights down, that's just continuous people coming in and out. On TV, people go to sleep, people change the channel, people switch to another show. You have to engage an attention span, and also an attention span that through the years has decreased. We have a TikTok attention span now. We have the attention span of an Instagram reel. And so it's like a scene over 2 minutes, a minute and a half, you risk people doing this. That's what you risk. And we've all done it, is the thing. We've all watched the show, been like, all right, this is dragging. Like, let me go check my messages. And so that's what they want to avoid. So, again, that first draft that I wrote, which I was really proud of, I turned it in, and there was a scene that was maybe 3.5 pages, or maybe a scene that was 5 pages, and they were like, nah, this would never, this would never pass. Fix this. And I had to kind of discipline myself. And because as a playwright, also, you want to get it all out on the page. So you're just like, this is the best dialogue I've ever written. And they're like, it doesn't matter. Get to the point, start the scene in the middle of the conversation, not the top of the conversation. We can figure out context and all those things, get in and out of it. So that was a big thing I had to sacrifice. I would say that was the biggest thing. The scene page length kind of thing was really, and wasn't easy. It wasn't easy either, because you want it all, but you can't have it.
Hi, Chris. I have a question. My name is Andre. Apologies for being late. Really thank you for your time. Um,
Andreas Pina.
I love you,
Meet
Magdalene.
Chris.
Um, yeah, thank you so much for making time. I I'm curious what are your thoughts on like seeking representation as a writer? I'm not someone that has like a whole bunch of plays, like I only have a few. Do you think it's one of those things where you should just have like it's okay if you have just like two plays in a TV pilot, or do you think that you need to have like guns blazing like 10 plays before you start seeking representation? Like I guess how do you measure that? And how do you even measure if you're quali quote unquote qualified to be pursuing one? I know people that get out of Yale and Juilliard, they've never produced a play and they get representation, while others are like hustling, trying to do plays off Broadway, and they don't have any representation. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think you were here when I said this at the top, but there's no right way, is what I found, because I didn't come from any of those schools. I didn't study in those things. I didn't have the representation coming out of college. I don't have a master's. I don't have any of it. So I mean, I had to do the guns blazing route, or else I would not have been noticed. Quite frankly, I had to do the guns blazing output, always having something going up kind of thing, or else I wouldn't be here. And also that was because I didn't have that education, writing was my way of learning. So the more I wrote, the better I got at it. So it was kind of like, I'm going to write, at one point I was like, I'm going to write a play a month. Um, just to see where I am at the end of the year. And just so no matter what a company needs or wants, I have something to fit it. So that was my approach. I say if you have two really good plays and a really good pilot, that's fine. Um, but again, there's no right way. For me, representation wise, I got an agent last, it's not even been a year since I've had an agent. I got it in like October, I think, of last year. And it was literally, again, through an approach of, I don't know how to get one of these. And a mentor of mine, told me, look on the websites of your favorite writers and email their agents. And that's what I did. So over like 2 days, I just emailed like, I think 12 agents. And I said, this is who I am. This is what I've done. I'm seeking representation. And only 2 out of the 12 got back to me. And the first one who got back to me, she responded within an hour, and that's who my agent is. She responded within an hour. She said, send me 2 of your plays. And that's it. And I said, she handles business. I like that. She gets to the point. And I did that. And she became my agent a couple weeks later. So I'm 2 plays in a pilot. If you send those 2 plays in a pilot and they're good, you could probably get an agent. I think what it comes down to is, do you think you need because even this TV job, technically, I didn't get it I got it through the mentorship program. If I didn't have an agent, I still would have applied for this program. I still would have gotten this job. I think what an agent does best, one, an agent works for you. You're not an employee of your agent. An agent is an employee of you. The only way they eat is if you eat. So it's not kind of like oh, I need an agent to become successful. That's not true. If anything, an agent needs you to become successful. They need as many clients on their Rolodex as possible to survive. But also, what a agent does best is when it comes down to that paperwork stuff. That's how my agent helps me. Is contracts, paperwork, negotiations. Because I got the contract for the show and it looked fine with me. I don't read legal jargon. I don't know industry standards, minimums. I don't know any of that. So I read it, being who I am. I'm like, yeah, sounds good. Send it off, sign it. But she has the knowledge to be like, we're not just going to accept the first thing that comes to us. Let me look over it. And she, again, English teacher route, she puts down what she doesn't think should be worded in the way that it is and write an ink and sends it back to the business department at the network. And then they send it back and they change it. She sends back more changes and it goes back and forth. And I don't have to do anything. And then she sends me a final version. She's like, okay, sign this one. And then I will send it off to them. And I will do that. Now, that's where it helps me. Not necessarily in getting the opportunities, because I think we all, and yeah, they can send things off to theaters, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I think that what we're all doing is what gets us the opportunity, just submitting and doing those things ourselves. That hasn't changed for me. Even now, living in LA, doing this TV thing, even earlier today, I'm looking for submission opportunities. I'm applying to festivals. I'm looking at residencies. It doesn't stop. And the agent, especially if they have a lot of clients, they aren't going to spend their full day saying, how can I help you specifically? You got to help yourself. And the more you help yourself, the more they see, oh, this person is going to be out there doing things. I need to stick with them and try to get them things. And it's also reaching out to your agents. I have reached out to my agent more than she'd reached out to me, being like, let's do this. And I remind her, which might be an asshole move, but I'll put in emails. I'll be like, I think we both want to continue this lifestyle. Let's keep getting jobs. And she's like, roger that. And you have to nudge them because, again, they work for you. You're talking to someone who works for you. So I would say if you feel like you're ready for an agent, go for the agent. At least put your name out there into their inboxes. But don't feel like you need one to be successful or to get your work out there, because essentially what you're doing to get it out there is the exact same thing you'll be doing with an agent.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing your from stage to being a television writer journey, Cris. And I love how your message was like, there's no wrong or right way. There's the I'm gonna do this way. And I think quite often we get stuck in the what is the way question as opposed to what is the will? And you have the will. And that's why you're an artist. You're not here to find a pre-paved path, but to say, I'm making this path. I'm a trailblazer. And I really thank you for sharing your trailblazing story. Because I remember in our meetings, because you were an active member of the Artist Collective last year, you're like, I read a play a month. And everybody was like, what? And he's like, yeah, I'm doing it. And I loved it when you shared that. I was like, you're doing it. A play a month? Man, I started like writing at least 10 pages a day because I'm like, if he can do a month, I can do 10 pages a day. And that was really encouraging. And so, anyone watching this, if you're like saying that there's a rule, a path, it's like, that's not the arts. That's not the arts. And Chris's story is testimony. It's not the arts. You got to want it and do it and keep on doing it. If you don't get it right away, like he said, you get your rejections, just keep on knocking through, keep knocking those doors. Forget the rejections. That's just not for you. And so thank you so much, Cris. And thank you, the members of the Artist Collective, Anjou, Hippolyte, Petron Brown, Andreas Pina, Anthony Pratt, and Diane Delahaye for being part of this conversation. And I hope you all get inspired to find your way, make your way, be undeniable. Thank you.